What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards, old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we listened to the fans and we finally got around to playing another game of Pauper Commander. In this game, we played our Pauper decks, but with the basic commander rules of 40 life and 21 commander damage. First up, we have Eddie playing his Boros partner pairing of Rograkh and Ardenn. This deck looks to cast Rograkh on turn 1 and suit him up with as much equipment as possible in order to swing in for value. Next, we have Chris playing Fogg's Boros Spellslinger commander, Blaze Commando. This deck looks to cast his commando out and then start slinging spells in order to deal damage and create an army of soldier tokens. Then we have Justin playing an artifact-based Voltron deck using Shambling Suit. This deck looks to cast a lot of low CMC artifacts in order to pump his commander up for lethal commander damage. Lastly, we have Fogg playing his Temur Bear tribal deck being led by Bear's Companion. This deck looks to cast a lot of bears and wreak a lot of havoc. Bear up. Now that we have our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Chris draws and plays a Plains for turn, that taps 1 for a Wayfarer's Bauble. Justin draws and plays a Waste for turn, then he taps 1 for a Ginger Brute and attacks Chris for 1. Fogg draws and plays Evolving Wilds before cracking to go get a tapped island. Eddie draws and plays his own Evolving Wilds before casting his commander Rograkh for 0 and sacking his wilds to go get a Plains. Chris draws and plays a Mountain before paying 2 to crack his Bauble going to get another Plains. Justin draws and plays a second Waste. He then taps 2 to cast Environmental Science, going to get a Waste and gaining 2 life. He then swings his Ginger Brute at Fogg for 1. Fogg draws and plays a Forest before tapping 2 to cast a Ferocious Grizzly Bear. Eddie plays a Darksteel Citadel for turn, then taps 1 to cast an Explorer Scope. He then pays 1 to equip the scope to his commander and goes to combat swinging Rograkh at Chris for 0, but on the attack, Eddie reveals a Plains off the top of his library, putting it into play. Chris draws and plays another Mountain. He then taps out and casts Student of Ojutai. Justin draws and drops in an Ornithopter before playing another Waste and then tapping out to cast his commander, Shambling Suit. He then swings his Ginger Brute at Eddie for 1. Fogg draws and plays a Mountain for turn that taps 3 for a Cultivate, putting another Forest into play. He then swings his Bear Eddie for 2 and passes. Eddie draws and taps 1 for a Darksteel Axe. He then pays to equip the axe to his commander and swings him at Chris for 2 damage. He then reveals a Mountain off his scope, putting it into play. Chris draws and taps 2 for a Firebrand Archer before passing. Justin draws and plays another Waste. He then taps 2 to play Executioner's Hood, paying to equip it to his commander. Justin then goes to combat and swings his commander at Fogg for 4 damage. Fogg plays another island for turn that taps a Forest to cast Explore, drawing a card but not playing another land. He then taps 2 for an Arcane Signet before tapping the Signet for Nature's Claim to destroy Justin's Executioner's Hood. The Hood is then destroyed and Justin gains 4 life. Fogg then swings his Bear Eddie for another 2 damage. Eddie draws and plays a Cathar Shield before tapping 1 for Vorak Battlehorns, which he then equips to his commander. He then swings his commander Chris for another 2 commander damage, not hitting a land. Chris draws and taps out to cast his commander Blaze Commando. Justin draws and taps 3 for a Letter of Acceptance. He then taps a letter for a Jack-o'-lantern and another one for a Mirror Scrappling and passes. Fogg draws and taps 5 to cast his commander, Bear's Companion, getting a 4/4 Bear Buddy. He then swings his Bear Eddie for another 2 damage. Eddie draws, then taps enough to cast his other commander Ardenn. He then taps 1 more to cast his Seltari Foot Soldier. Eddie then free equips his shield to Rograkh and swings him at Chris for another 2 commander damage, not hitting a land off his scope trigger. Chris draws for turn and plays a Plains and passes. Justin draws, plays a Waste, and then taps 2 for a Fodder Tosser. He then taps 3 for a Workshop Assistant, and then goes to combat swinging his commander at Fogg, who blocks with his commander. Fogg draws and taps 2 for Beduvian Bear. He then taps 2 more to cast Mother Bear, and goes to combat swinging his Grizzly Bear Justin and his Bear token at Eddie. Eddie doesn't block, and Justin blocks with his assistant, and returns an artifact to his hand from his graveyard. Eddie draws and taps 1 for a Goblin Cavalier. He then taps 2 more for a Cliffhaven Kitesail, and in response, Chris casts Burst Lightning, targeting Ardenn. He then gains 2 life and his opponents all lose 1. Eddie then responds with a Feat of Resistance, giving Ardenn protection from red. He then equips the Kitesail to the Cavalier, and in response, Chris casts Electrostatic Bolt, targeting Ardenn. Gaining 2 life while his opponents all lose 1 life, and he creates 2 soldier tokens. Ardenn then dies, and Eddie swings 2 more commander damage at Chris. Chris draws return then taps 2 for an Anointed Priest before casting a Spark Spray, gaining 3 life while his opponents all lose 1 life. He then creates 2 soldier tokens. Chris then swings his tokens at Fog for 4 damage. Justin draws return and plays a waste before recasting the Executioner's Hood and equipping it back to his commander. He then sacks his Acceptance Letter to draw a card and goes to combat swinging his commander at Fog for 7 damage. Fog draws return and plays a Swiftwater Cliffs before going to combat and swinging his whole crew at Chris, who declares no blocks. But before damage is dealt, Fog casts Burn Bright and a Kick Diner Charge, giving all his creatures +4/+0. Chris then takes the damage and goes to 15 life. Eddie draws and plays a Haunted Cloak and equips it to his Cavalier. He then swings out at Fog, who can't block, and then reveals a Desert of the Fervent and passes. Chris just draws and passes again. Justin draws and plays a Barbed Sextant and a Farfinder and goes to find a basic land. He then plays a Waste and pass. Fog draws and taps out to recast his commander, creating another 4/4 Bear Buddy and passes. Eddie draws and taps 2 for an Armory Veteran. He then casts Boots of Speed and attaches them to his Veteran. Eddie then swings his team at Chris, and in response, Chris casts Orm's Thunder, targeting the Battle Horns, gaining 2 life while his opponents all lose 1 life. Eddie then casts Blacksmith's Skill, giving his artifact hexproof. Chris then takes his damage. At the end of his turn, Justin cracks his Sextant and draws the next turn's upkeep. Chris draws return and passes. Justin draws return and casts Delos Cone for free, as well as a free Frogmite. He then swings his commander at Eddie for 10 commander damage. Fog draws and casts Ghostly Flicker, exiling his commander and returning it to play, creating another Bear Buddy. He then swings all his available bears at Justin, and before damage is dealt, he casts Trumpet Blast, pumping the team up +2/+0. In response, Chris casts Riot Control, preventing all combat damage and gaining 17 life. Eddie draws return and plays a land. He then taps out to recast Ardenn. After he casts his commander, Eddie decides to take all of his equipment and attach them to his Cavalier, giving him +14/+0. He then goes to combat and swings his entire team at Chris in order to prove a point, and he takes Chris out of the game. At the end of Eddie's turn, Justin pays 1 to sack his Jack-o'-lantern, exiling a card from Fog's graveyard and drawing a card. He then starts his turn by drawing. He then plays a waste and casts Introduction to Annihilation, exiling the Cavalier. Justin swings his commander at Eddie for 9 more commander damage. Fog draws and pays 3 for an Uvenwald Bear. He then swings his 3/4/4 bears at Justin, taking him to 29 life. Eddie casts a Champion of Flame for turn, as well as a Forsake the Worldly to exile Justin's Ornithopter. After getting rid of Justin's only flyer in a last-ditch effort, Eddie decides to equip all of his equipment to this Champion of Flame and swings out at Justin for 19 damage. Justin draws, then plays a Voltaic Servant, then goes to combat, returning the favor to Eddie by killing him with commander damage. Fog draws return, then goes straight to combat, swinging all his bears at Justin, who knows the game is over, so he declares no blocks. The big winner of today's Pauper variation game is Fog playing his Bear Buddy deck. After playing more than a few Pauper games, I definitely found out different strategies work better in this format than others, and Go White token decks are pretty good. The MVP of today's game was Bear's Companion. Even though I didn't really hit many of my blink effects, the ability to recast him multiple times to create 4/4 bears is pretty great. Thanks for watching and have a happy Christmas holiday. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to see more decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.